Ironically, while I was preparing this speech on Tuesday, I got a text from my sister reminding my brother and I that our mother had passed away exactly 18 years ago to the day on Tuesday. I then realized that these memories that I was preparing all directly involved my mother. I do believe it would be disingenuous of me to not admit that I think my mother would be pleased if she knew that I was compiling these early memories. But as for the answers to the aforementioned questions that I posed about the significance of our early memories, I can only share a little bit of what I read on Chat GPT. Most people's earliest conscious memories generally start around age 3 or 4, though this can vary. Research shows that memories from this age range tend to be more vivid and enduring, likely due to increased cognitive development, language skills, and self-awareness at this age. However, some people report fragmented memories from early as age 2, while others may not have clear memories until closer to age 5 or 6. Let's have a show of hands. Please raise your hand if your earliest childhood memories go back to when you were 5. If they go back to when you were 4. Anybody when you were age under 4 or 3? Okay. Age 2. Okay. For whatever unscrutable reason, as I've shared my memories, early memories with people over the years, they've often remarked, wow, you remember all the way back to when you were 3 years old? I can't remember back that far. But what I think is important is not the age at which we remember these vivid things, but the significance that they had when we were growing up. Here are 3 or 4 of my most vivid early childhood memories dating back to ages 3 and 3.5. There are more to be sure, but these are the top ones. Episode number 1, what happened to the aspirin? Where's the aspirin? When I was 3 years old, I remember my mother was most likely in the kitchen. I remember walking down the hall, opening the door to my parents' bedroom, seeing the very beautifully made bed. My eyes focused on one object that was in the center of that bed, and that was a purse, one of my mother's purses. I was obsessed with playing with her purses, and she had many. I eagerly climbed onto the bed, put the purse in my lap, opened it, and just like any other 3-year-old, emptied the contents on my lap. As I was sifting through it, I saw a little bottle of aspirin. Now, it must not have had a childproof cap because I do remember sitting there putting each one in my mouth. Whether they were chewable or not, I do not know, but I ingested them. About 10 minutes later, my mom came in the room and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm playing with your purse, Mommy." And she rushed over and she saw the empty bottle and she said, "Where's the aspirin? What happened to the aspirin?" And I said, "I ate them all, Mommy." Now, all I remember after that was her rushing out of the room. I remember her making me lie down on our mustard-colored living room sofa. I remember 2 men coming through the door. One of them was wearing black pants. One of them was carrying like an old-fashioned doctor's bag. It had like a circular semi-handle, and it was a big, thick, looked like an old-fashioned bag. I remember someone saying, "Lie still." And then I remember these black hoses coming out and somehow being deposited inside of me. When that was over and they left, I said to my mom, "Mommy, what did they do?" And she said, "They just pumped your stomach, Ann. You would have died if they had not pumped your stomach." Now, that didn't mean much to me at all. But I remember just saying, okay. And I just kept on playing. Episode number 2, not as happy, but firmly etched in my mind. I was born in 1961. My mother had another child in 1964, my younger brother, John. I remember vaguely for it seemed days on end, my mother saying to myself and my siblings, "You're going to have another baby pretty soon. There's going to be a new baby in the house. The baby's coming." And I remember walking around the house saying, "The baby's coming, the baby's coming." Finally, the day came for my dad and my mom to bring the baby home. I remember it was a very, very gray, overcast day. For some reason, my brother, sister, and I were sitting on the floor playing at the end of the hallway, right near the dinette. Straight ahead of that was the side door. My dad came through the door wearing a big, long, gray trench coat. There were water droplets on his coat. And back then they didn't wear boots. They would have these little rubber slip-ons over his shoes. Now, a little 3-year-old looking up at a 6-foot tall man, it looked like I was just looking at a huge giant. I remember my brother and sister saying, "Where's the baby, Daddy? Daddy, where's the baby? Where's the baby?" And I remember I was the last person to say, "Where's the baby, Daddy?" And I remember my dad just standing there and pausing for a second saying, "There isn't going to be a baby." Now, I don't remember what he said after that, but I do remember at that point just feeling very empty and like I was falling through space. Later, my mom told me that she indeed had a stillborn child, whom they named John. Not a happy memory, but I do so remember it. Episode number 3, dangling from a precipice. Now, this was tragedy in my mind at the time. Looking back, it's sort of humorous, but for a 3-year-old, this was pretty traumatic. I remember I did not go to daycare. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, so I had lots of time to play outside. One day I was playing outside. It was a very, very windy day by anyone's standards. It most likely was the fall, another gray overcast day. There were branches. It was so windy that branches were kind of blowing along the sidewalk, and our side door, the storm door, was kind of rattling. I remember thinking, okay, it's time to go inside. And there was a concrete stoop at the side of our house, just like the house we have now. I remember climbing very trepidatiously each big stair, hanging onto the handle, which I was about to open. And it was so windy. Right as I put my hand on it, there was a huge gust of wind, and it just flipped the door open and left me hanging there like I was hanging on a precipice. And I looked down. It was probably less than 3 feet, but it was like looking down into a canyon. I remember my mom standing there at the doorway saying, just let go, Ann, just jump. It's not that far. Now, I don't remember why she didn't notice that I was so afraid. She just kept saying, "Go ahead and jump and jump." And I remember saying, I can't, it's too far. Now, to me, it was a level of adrenaline like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie where he's just dangling off the side of a plane. Of course, he was never afraid, but I was terrified. Finally, my little arm just got so tired of hanging onto the door that I just let go and plunged to the cement. I sprained my ankle. My next memory after that was not only the bandaged ankle, but I remember my mother putting me in a stroller. Now, I knew that at age 3 or 3.5, I was way too big for a stroller, but I remember her walking me down the street, knocking on the doors of her neighbor lady friends who were also stay-at-home moms. My mom was a little bit melodramatic. I do not know anyone that acts the way she did. Anyways, she knocks on the door. The neighbor ladies would come to the door. They'd say, "Joanne, Ann, what happened?" And my mother would say, I clearly remember, "Well, June, Ann has sprained her ankle. And the doctors have told us she won't be walking for at least 2 weeks." Now, I was trained to be a very polite child. I remember sitting there being so angry, like, why are you parading me in this stroller? Must I be made a public spectacle? That's what I remember about that one. I don't see any timing cards that have come on. There is time for another story. Professional photo day. When I was right about that age, I remember my mother saying to all 3 of us kids, "There's going to be a Sunday afternoon soon where we are going to bring a professional photographer to the house. He's going to take your photo, and he's going to take your photo, Vicki and Eric. He's going to take a photo of all 3 of you together, and he's a professional." Now, I remember at the time not knowing much, but we did watch a lot of TV, especially variety shows like the Ed Sullivan, Carol Burnett show. So I was old enough to know what a celebrity was, even though I didn't have the vocabulary. And I remember thinking, professional photographer is taking my photo. This must mean that I must be sort of important. I must be like one of those people on TV. And I was overjoyed. I thought, I must be really, really important. And I remember pacing in the living room the day that he came. It was a Sunday afternoon, just thinking to myself, I'm getting my photo taken. I'm getting my photo taken by a professional. I just can't wait. Now, I happened to dig up that photo from that day, which I am passing around. And unless you're just a Scrooge, you can't but help notice that the little girl on the right is beside herself with joy. I have time for another Another story. This will be particularly important for those of you who are Catholic or know something about the Catholic religion. I was raised very, very, very Catholic. I remember going to Mass with my parents, and I remember not understanding a word that the priest said. It's because he was speaking in Latin. I'm old enough for that. They used to say Latin Masses. I remember one day, my mother said to me, we were all by ourselves. She had this big smile on her face. She said, guess what, Ann? And I thought, gosh, she's got some good news. She said, guess what? Pretty soon, the priest is no longer going to speak in Latin. He's going to speak in English. We'll be able to understand what the priest says, Ann. Isn't that wonderful? And I didn't care as long as I could sing the hymns as loud as I could. And then she said, and guess what? He's no longer going to turn his back to the congregation. He's not going to turn his back to us anymore, Ann. He'll be looking right at us. And I remember trying to like politely go along because she was so excited. But I remember thinking, well, I was never offended in the first place that he turned his back to me. But at any rate, those are my top 5 memories from childhood. The question remains, is it worth preserving these memories? I say yes. I say we could all challenge ourselves to, when we find a little bit of time, to preserve these memories somehow, because I'm positive that someday your great-great-great-grandson or your great-great-great-nephew will be so glad that you took the time to give them a portal to their beloved ancestors. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guest,